Today, I want to talk about something many of us struggle with: giving too much of ourselves. We give our time, our energy, our love, and often our peace, all in the name of being there for others. We pour out so much that we forget to leave anything for ourselves. But here's the hard truth: not everyone deserves your constant presence. Not everyone appreciates what you freely give. And if you keep overextending yourself, you'll eventually feel empty, exhausted, unheard, and unseen. It's time to pause, not out of anger, not to play games, but to protect your value. Let them feel your absence. Let the silence speak. Let the space you leave behind remind them of your worth. Sometimes your greatest power is in what you withhold: your energy, your time, your attention. People notice more when it's missing than when it's always available. Your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. So stop giving so much, create boundaries, reclaim your peace, and let others meet you at your worth, not at your expense. So often we underestimate the weight of our presence in other people's lives. We assume that showing up, being available, and constantly saying yes is simply what kindness looks like. But the truth is, your time, your energy, and your presence are not things to be given away without thought. They are gifts, not obligations, and the more freely you give them to people who don't value them, the more you dilute their worth. When you're always there, answering the call, showing up unasked, checking in, fixing, supporting, covering, your presence can start to feel ordinary to others. You become background noise in someone else's life, even if you're playing a major role. People start to assume you'll always be there. They stop noticing how much you do, how much you carry, and how deeply you care. That's not because they're cruel, it's because you've unintentionally taught them that your presence is permanent. But permanence isn't promised, not in relationships, not in friendships, not in any form of connection. People forget that just as easily as you came into their life, you can choose to step away. And that's where the shift begins, when you recognize that your presence is something you allow, not something they're owed. You get to choose where you invest your energy, and it should be in places where it's nurtured, not taken for granted. When someone values your presence, they show it. They don't just take, they give back. They match your effort, your energy, and your care. And when they don't, that's your cue to pause, not to punish, but to protect. Because when you show up for people who never show up for you, you end up disappearing in the process. You become overextended, underappreciated, and eventually invisible, even though you're right there in front of them. Your availability should be selective, not because you're arrogant, but because you understand your worth. Just as you wouldn't give someone an expensive gift who never says thank you, you shouldn't keep giving your presence to those who don't acknowledge it. And yet, many of us feel guilty for pulling back, as if choosing ourselves means we're being selfish. But there's a difference between selfishness and self-respect. Protecting your peace is not a crime. People begin to value what's rare. That doesn't mean you need to withdraw from everyone or shut people out. But it does mean that sometimes your absence can do more than your constant presence ever could. It reminds others, and sometimes even yourself, that you are not an unlimited resource. You are not a bottomless well of comfort and attention. You are human, and you need rest, space, and mutual respect. When you treat your presence like a gift, others are more likely to treat it that way too. They'll notice when you're there, and feel it when you're not. That contrast is powerful. It doesn't make you cold, it makes you intentional. It reminds people that your love, your time, and your energy are choices, not chores. And perhaps most importantly, it allows you to reclaim your sense of worth. Because when you recognize your presence as valuable, you stop begging to be seen and start being selective about who gets to experience the gift of you. At first, giving feels good. It feels purposeful, even empowering. You help, you support, you show up, and you see the immediate impact. Someone is comforted, relieved, or simply happier because of what you've done, and because of that, you keep giving. You go the extra mile, you sacrifice your time, and you tell yourself this is what being a good person, friend, partner, or family member is all about. But what starts as kindness can quietly evolve into a dangerous pattern, one where you're constantly giving and rarely if ever receiving in return. Over time, the imbalance starts to show. You begin to notice that you're the one always reaching out first. You're the one who rearranges your schedule to make space. You're the one who listens, supports, shows up while others assume, expect, and take. What once felt like generosity now feels like obligation. And worse, it becomes invisible. The more you give without boundaries, the less people even notice you're giving at all. It becomes part of the background, expected, unacknowledged, and underappreciated. This is how resentment is born, not out of a lack of love, but from a lack of balance. You start to feel used, not because people are intentionally taking advantage of you, but because you've trained them to believe you'll always be there, no matter what. You start to internalize frustration. You start to feel taken for granted. But instead of saying something, you give even more, hoping that if you keep showing up, someone will finally notice your effort. That someone will return the favor without you having to ask. But they rarely do. And the more you push yourself to keep giving, the more you drift away from yourself. Your needs get buried under your obligations. Your emotional energy gets drained by everyone else's expectations. You wear a smile, but it's heavy. You keep saying yes, while your mind screams, "I'm tired." You lose the ability to check in with yourself because you're too busy checking in on everyone else. And slowly, quietly, you begin to burn out. Burn out isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like numbness. Sometimes it looks like isolation, irritability, or exhaustion. You're still functioning, but you feel hollow. You're still present, but not fully there, and the people around you, the ones you've supported for so long, don't even realize you're struggling because you've made it look so easy for so long. You've hidden your fatigue behind strength. You've masked your depletion with a smile, and they think you're fine because you've never shown them anything else. What makes this cycle even harder to break is the guilt. You feel guilty for feeling drained. You feel guilty for wanting space. You question whether you're being ungrateful, selfish, or cold, but this guilt is misplaced. It's not selfish to recognize your limits. It's not wrong to expect reciprocity. It's not cold to want to feel seen and supported too. The real injustice is how long you've been ignoring your own needs for the sake of others. Overgiving isn't the same as loving. Love is mutual. It's shared, balanced, and safe. Overgiving, on the other hand, often comes from fear of not being enough, fear of losing people, fear of being replaced, and that fear convinces you that the only way to matter is to constantly prove your value through effort. But love shouldn't be a performance. Your worth shouldn't be measured by how much you can endure or how much you give away. You were never meant to carry everything for everyone. You're allowed to pause. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to want energy that meets yours, not drains it. Because when you give beyond your limits, you don't just lose time, you lose yourself. And no relationship is worth that cost. Boundaries often go unnoticed until they're enforced. You can quietly feel uncomfortable, overwhelmed, or taken for granted. But as long as you continue to allow certain behaviors, people will assume everything is fine. That's the tricky part about being generous or emotionally available. People get used to it. They don't always realize when they're crossing a line if you never show them where the line is. And over time, your silence becomes permission. Your constant yes becomes expectation. But boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting your peace. They're about defining what's acceptable and what's not. The problem is, many of us struggle to communicate those limits until we're already drained. We wait too long. We keep giving, tolerating, adjusting until we hit a breaking point, and that's when we finally draw the line. But by then, we're not setting a boundary from strength. We're setting it from exhaustion, frustration, or emotional injury. That's why enforcing boundaries early, clearly, and calmly is so important. Because people don't change how they treat you out of convenience. They change when they're required to, when they feel the shift in your behavior, when they hear the no that used to be a yes. When they notice your absence instead of your presence, they begin to understand the value of your limits. They begin to reflect, and only then do they start adjusting their behavior, not because you begged, but because you stopped bending. There's power in withdrawal, not in a passive-aggressive way, but in a self-aware, intentional way. When someone repeatedly takes advantage of your kindness, your energy, or your time, the most effective way to get their attention isn't to argue, it's to disengage. When access is denied, appreciation begins. That's when people start to ask themselves why you're not available anymore, why your tone has changed, or why your energy feels different. That's when they finally feel your boundary, not just hear about it. It's important to understand that people mirror what you allow. If you constantly rescue, they'll stop trying to save themselves. If you always adjust, they'll stop compromising. If you continue to show up even when they don't, they'll stop feeling the need to meet you halfway. But once you change the pattern, even slightly, it shifts the dynamic. You reclaim your space, you stop participating in your own depletion, and you give others a chance to grow by no longer cushioning their inconsideration. Some people won't like your boundaries. They'll call you distant, cold, or difficult. That's because they were benefiting from your lack of limits. They were comfortable with the version of you who never said no, who tolerated too much, and who constantly gave. But setting a boundary will always reveal someone's true intentions. If your distance upsets them more than their behavior upset you, that's a red flag, not a reflection of your character. The reality is, people can only respect what they're made to acknowledge. You teach others how to treat you by how consistently you treat yourself. If you keep showing that your needs come last, people will follow your lead. But when you start honoring your energy, protecting your time, and voicing your discomfort, people are forced to recognize that you are no longer available for disrespect or emotional neglect, even in subtle forms. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They let the right people in and keep the wrong energy out. And the moment you make someone feel the consequences of crossing a line, not with anger, but with distance, that's when the lesson sinks in. That's when respect begins to take root, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. Sometimes we don't realize how much someone contributes to our lives until they're no longer around. Their presence becomes so familiar, so routine, that it fades into the background like a soft hum you don't hear until it stops. This is one of the subtle but powerful truths about human nature. We often notice more in the silence than we do in the noise. When someone pulls back, even slightly, it creates space, and in that space, awareness begins to grow. Absence forces reflection. When you're always present, always available, people can get comfortable not out of malice, but out of habit. They stop questioning whether you'll show up. They stop appreciating the emotional weight you carry. But when you remove yourself, when you stop answering every call, stop chasing, stop initiating, something shifts. That empty space you leave behind begins to speak. It asks questions your presence kept quiet. It prompts others to consider what they've been taking for granted. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when something is missing. Just as a room feels larger once the furniture is removed, your absence can suddenly expose how much emotional space you were truly occupying in someone's life. Maybe they didn't notice how much effort you put in, or how much support you provided, until it's no longer there to lean on. That contrast is often more powerful than any explanation or confrontation could ever be. Sometimes it's not until you step away that others begin to recognize your value, and this recognition doesn't always come quickly. It can take time. At first, they may think you're just busy, then they may start to wonder if something's wrong, and eventually they might realize that the warmth, the reassurance, the energy you brought into their life wasn't automatic, it was a choice you made over and over. A gift they stopped unwrapping. That realization, though delayed, can be profound. Absence is a mirror. It reflects not only your worth but also the behavior of others. It gives people the opportunity to examine themselves, to notice the imbalance, to remember the connection, to sit with the silence and ask themselves what caused it. When you're always around, people rarely feel the urgency to change. But when you're gone, they're left with the echo of what once was, and in that echo, they may finally hear the truth. In relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, the presence of one person often carries the emotional weight for two. When you step back, the other person is forced to carry their share, and if they can't or won't, then that tells you everything you need to know. It's not about revenge or manipulation, it's about clarity. You don't pull away to hurt someone, you pull away to heal yourself and to create space for truth to reveal itself. It's also important to note that absence doesn't always mean physical distance. It can be emotional. Energetic, you can be in the same room with someone and still decide to stop over-functioning, stop explaining, stop rescuing. That internal shift when you detach from the outcome, when you stop trying to prove your worth, that's the kind of absence that creates deep awareness. Not just in others, but in yourself. You begin to see who you are without the need to be needed, and in that awareness you rediscover your own value. You begin to understand that being missed, being remembered, and being recognized, those things don't happen when you're constantly available. They happen when your absence leaves a meaningful gap, a silence that speaks, a pause that teaches, and that's when people start to truly see you not for what you gave them, but for who you are. Every day you wake up with a limited amount of energy, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. It's like a personal currency. You don't get to print more on demand, and yet many people spend it as if it's unlimited, giving pieces of themselves away to people, situations, and environments that never give anything back. But just like with money, where you invest your energy determines what kind of return you'll get. If you spend it carelessly, you'll find yourself emotionally bankrupt. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your energy. Some people are energy multipliers. They inspire you, support you, and give you something valuable in return: connection, honesty, safety, peace. Others are energy drainers. They complain, they expect, but they rarely reciprocate. The more time you spend around people who deplete you, the harder it becomes to focus on your goals, maintain your peace, and feel like yourself. Energy is invisible, but its impact is real and often. It's the difference between peace and chaos. Just as you wouldn't give all your money to someone who wastes it, you shouldn't give your energy to people who treat it like it's disposable. Yet many of us do this every day by staying in conversations that go nowhere, by showing up for people who wouldn't do the same, by engaging in drama we didn't create, or by saying yes when our soul is begging us to say no. These small leaks of energy add up over time. They don't just drain your day, they slowly erode your sense of self. Every time you say yes to something that drains you, you're saying no to something that could nourish you, and that's the part most people miss. Energy spent on things that don't align with your purpose or peace is energy stolen from what does. When you start to treat your energy like currency, you begin to ask better questions. Is this worth it? Does this feed me or bleed me? Will this person, task, or environment give me clarity or confusion? There is deep power in becoming intentional with your energy. When you stop chasing people who are indifferent, when you walk away from conversations that go in circles, when you stop over-explaining yourself to people who have already made up their minds, you begin to reclaim your personal power. Suddenly, you have more time, more clarity, more presence, not because life got easier, but because you stopped giving your best to what deserved your bare minimum. It's not selfish to protect your energy. It's wise, because your energy fuels everything: your creativity, your boundaries, your communication, your rest, your relationships, your ability to heal, and your capacity to grow. When you're drained, all of these things suffer. You may still show up, but you're not showing up fully. You're on autopilot, disconnected, barely getting by, and that isn't a life, it's survival. People may not understand when you start protecting your energy. They may call you distant, guarded, or selfish, but those who genuinely care about you will notice the change and respond with respect. They'll adjust. They'll meet you where you are instead of expecting you to keep overextending. The ones who get offended are usually the ones who benefited the most from your lack of boundaries. That alone tells you everything you need to know about where your energy was being spent. Your peace, your focus, your emotional well-being, these are priceless. They are not negotiable. They are not resources for others to freely consume. They are sacred, and they must be guarded, because when you protect your energy, you protect the quality of your life. You start to feel lighter, more grounded, more in control. Not because you changed everything, but because you finally understood that your energy is currency, and from now on, you're spending it wisely. There is a paradox that few people recognize until it's already taken a toll on them. The more accessible you are, the more people stop noticing you. It sounds harsh, but emotionally and psychologically it's true. Constant availability creates a kind of invisibility. When you're always there, responding quickly, adjusting your schedule, giving your time and attention without hesitation, you slowly become background noise. Predictable, expected, and unfortunately, easily overlooked. This phenomenon isn't about being unimportant, it's about being too consistent in a world that often values novelty, scarcity, and effort. When you are constantly present, people subconsciously devalue you the effort it takes to maintain that level of care. Your time becomes assumed. Your presence is no longer a gift, it's a given. And what's given freely, endlessly, and without boundaries tends to lose its perceived worth no matter how pure your intentions are. In personal relationships, this shows up when you're always the one reaching out, making plans, checking in. Eventually, the people on the receiving end stop initiating, not because they don't care, but because they've grown used to your effort carrying the relationship. They stop trying because they know you will. You become the emotional backbone, the reliable one, the constant until your presence fades into the fabric of their life like furniture they no longer notice. In the workplace, it plays out through the employee who never says no, who stays late, takes on extra work, and rarely asks for recognition. They become the go-to person not because they're the most valued, but because they're the most available. And ironically, that availability becomes their trap. Promotions go to the ones who advocate for themselves. Recognition lands on those who create boundaries. And the silent overachiever often finds themselves left behind, invisible in their reliability. This same pattern unfolds in family dynamics. where the most dependable person is often the last one to be asked how they're doing. The one who shows up for everyone becomes the one no one checks on. The one who always makes the effort becomes the one no one thinks needs it. Emotional invisibility is painful because it feels like being surrounded by people while still being unseen. It's not loneliness in the physical sense, it's loneliness in the emotional sense. When people get used to you being fine, they stop asking. When they know you'll always be there, they stop showing appreciation. It's not always intentional. Most people aren't malicious, they're just unaware. And that's the danger of always being available. You've created a version of yourself that never asks for anything, never rests, never retreats, and so others mirror that version back to you, assuming that's all you are: dependable, unshakable, low maintenance. The remedy isn't to become cold or withdrawn, it's to introduce space. Space teaches people to notice. When you don't respond immediately, people wonder. When you don't always initiate, they reflect. When you aren't at every event, on every call, or in every crisis, people begin to see the effort you once gave so freely. Distance reveals value. A pause creates perspective. And for the first time, people may begin to realize what your constant presence was truly worth. You don't owe anyone 24/7 access to your energy. You don't have to always be the one who shows up first, answers fastest, or stretches yourself the farthest. Visibility doesn't come from being everywhere all the time, it comes from being intentional with your presence. When you start to create space, when you let people miss you, when you stop flooding every moment with availability, you give them a chance to truly see you. There comes a time when pulling back becomes necessary, not to hurt others, but to protect yourself. This decision is often misunderstood. People might accuse you of being distant, cold, or selfish. But the reality is, stepping away is rarely about punishment. It's about preservation. When your emotional, mental, or even physical well-being is on the line, pulling back is not an act of cruelty. It is a declaration of clarity. It's a way of choosing peace over performance, truth over tolerance. People often mistake your distance as indifference, but it's usually the opposite. You cared deeply, you gave consistently, you showed up, you adjusted, you overextended. But clarity hits when you finally realize that what you're giving is being taken for granted, or worse, expected without acknowledgement. That realization stings, but it also opens your eyes, and when your eyes are open, your patterns change. You stop explaining yourself, you stop trying to force what's not flowing, you stop begging for basic decency. Pulling back is how you reclaim your power from dynamics that have become one-sided. It's how you shift the focus from how do I keep them happy to how do I keep myself whole. This isn't done with bitterness. It's done with quiet resolve. It's the silence after too many unheard words. It's the stillness after too much running. It's the moment you no longer carry the weight of being everything to everyone, because you've finally realized it's not sustainable, and more importantly, it's not healthy. In relationships, romantic, platonic, or professional, people often don't change until the comfort they've taken for granted is no longer there. Your pulling back might be the first time they're forced to face the reality of their actions. Maybe they never truly listened while you were present. Maybe they ignored your subtle signals, thinking you'd always stay. But when you step away, the silence becomes loud. Your absence becomes undeniable. And the truth you've been quietly living with becomes impossible to ignore. Clarity doesn't always come wrapped in words. Sometimes it's a shift in your energy. It's a refusal to argue. It's walking away from drama instead of participating in it. It's saying, I'm done, without fanfare, because you've already grieved the connection silently in your heart. People think pulling back is sudden, but more often than not, it's the final step in a long, quiet process. It's the visible result of countless invisible wounds. It's also a deeply self-loving act. When you pull back, you're telling yourself that your needs matter too, that you're no longer available for imbalance, that you won't keep showing up for those who won't meet you halfway. It's a moment of radical honesty with yourself. I cannot keep pouring from an empty cup. I cannot keep proving my worth where it's not seen. You stop needing others to change, and instead, you change your level of exposure to them. That's not cruelty, that's wisdom. People who truly value you will notice the shift. They'll feel the difference. And the ones who only valued what you gave, not who you are, will likely fall away. That's the risk you take with clarity. It might cost you connections, but it will save your spirit. You are not responsible for managing how others perceive your boundaries. You are only responsible for honoring your truth, and when that truth says enough, you listen, not to hurt anyone, but to heal yourself. Pulling back is a way of honoring the lessons you've learned. It's saying, I now understand the difference between effort and exhaustion, between loyalty and self-abandonment. It's not about shutting people out. It's about no longer inviting in energy that keeps you small, anxious, or unheard. You're not trying to control outcomes anymore. You're simply creating space for truth to rise and for alignment to find its way to you. At some point, you must understand that your constant giving isn't always appreciated the way it should be. Your presence, your love, your energy, they are not infinite resources. And the more you pour into people who don't pour back, the more you empty yourself for someone else's comfort while your own needs remain unmet. Pulling back is not about bitterness, it's not about revenge, it's about awareness. It's about reclaiming your value before it's completely diluted by routine and neglect. Letting people feel your absence is not an act of punishment, it's an invitation. An invitation for others to reflect, to remember what you brought to the table, to feel the space you used to fill and realize that it wasn't automatic, it was intentional. And more than anything, it's a reminder to yourself that you are not defined by how much you can endure for others, but by how well you honor your own worth. So stop giving so much to those who don't notice. Step back, let the silence speak, let your absence echo in the places where your voice was once ignored, and trust that the right people, the ones who truly value you, will not need to lose you to realize what they had. They'll feel your absence not as punishment, but as a call to rise, and in that space you will finally see who deserves the gift of your presence and who only ever wanted the convenience of it, because at the end of the day, your peace, your energy, your time, they are sacred. Stop giving them so freely to those who haven't earned them. Let them feel your absence, and in doing so, finally feel your own power.